Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to create your very own mixing template in Presonus Studio One. We're going to be looking at creating a mixing template here inside of Studio One today, but these same principles and these same techniques will apply to whatever DAW you're working in. It'll just be a little bit different on the back end where you save your template. But either way, this is going to help you stay creative and stay focused when you're mixing your song, and it's ultimately going to help you mix faster. But before we dive in here today, if you're looking to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and get started creating a template. So we're here on the start page inside of Studio One. This is Studio One Professional, but these same kind of techniques and principles will apply across the board here, no matter what DAW you're working in. It'll just, like I said, be different on the back end about how you save the template and where you save it. So we're going to create a new song here. And you can see all of my templates come up here. So it can be a little bit different with where you start. I think usually you start on the styles page here, but if you go over to user, you'll see all of the templates that you've created saved here. We're going to start with an empty song here today. I'm not going to name it or anything like that. We're going to click OK. It's going to open up a completely empty session here for me. And the first thing I want to think through is what kind of tracks could I get as a mix engineer. Now for me, I'm usually working in rock or pop or folk, stuff like that. So I usually get drums, bass, any kind of guitars, percussion, keyboards, vocals, background vocals. So I want to create tracks for all of these different things. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to press T. That's going to help me create tracks. And if you don't have the shortcut here, you can always just click the add tracks guy here. But I'm going to press T, and let's go mono tracks. I'm going to create mono tracks here, and where they map input and output wise doesn't matter unless you're going to use this template for recording as well, which I usually do use my template for recording as well as mixing and mastering. And we're going to call them just kick for the moment, and we'll create a kick in, a kick out, a snare top, a snare bottom. We'll do 4 toms and a room mic for the moment. So we'll do 9 tracks here for the moment. And I like to color my drums blue, so I'm going to pick the color here. They're going to be colored blue. You can also pick the type of track. So if you're creating MIDI tracks or instrument tracks, you can change that as well. Let's create these 9 tracks here, and let's go through and name them. So we'll go kick in. And if you don't know the shortcut to go to the next track to name it, it's just tab. So kick out, snare top, snare bottom, rack tom, oop, I'm spelling rack wrong, rack tom 1, rack tom 2, rack tom 3. I'm creating 4 toms because that's what I have set up here at the studio, and it gives me usually enough that I've never had to create more tom tracks when I pull in files from a client. I usually start with a mono room mic, but it's easy enough to switch it to a stereo room mic if I do get stereo rooms. The other thing I'm going to create here is 1 stereo track for overheads, and I like to shortcut some of these names here. So you can do really shorthand stuff when you're naming if it makes it easier for you. So like KI for kick in, KO for kick out. You could do SNR for snare if you want. You could do R tom for rack tom and F tom for floor tom. The only thing I abbreviate here is overheads. Everything else I want to see the full name for here. So that's all of our drums that we could get. I could create, let's create 2 percussion tracks here, and we'll make them both mono. We'll do a tambourine and a shaker. So we'll go tambo and then shaker. So this is giving me slots that if I do get percussion tracks from a client, I can just drag them right in here along with the rest of the drums. Let's do bass guitar now. So I'm usually getting bass guitar from clients. Bass guitar is red. We'll call that bass. And again, as we work here, if you plan on using this for recording as well, just assign your inputs to all of these tracks as you go along here. So we'll call one bass DI, we'll call the other one bass amp in case I get a DI track and an amp track. From there, let's do electric guitars. So electric guitars are darker green. We'll call them rhythm GTR left, and then we'll do rhythm GTR right. And actually what we'll do is we'll create a slot for a lead guitar as well. So if I get, like a pair of electric guitars and a lead guitar, I'll have room for that. So we'll do left, right, and then we'll do lead guitar. After that, I like to throw in at least a pair of acoustics. So if I get acoustic guitars, I can't spell today. So we've got acoustic, and I usually call the other one acoustic double. And if you want to shorthand double, you can do DBL. I usually just spell out the word double. I don't know why, but I just do. For keys, let's do a pair of stereo keys. So if I were to get like an organ and a piano, or a piano and a string track, so we'll go piano and we'll go organ. Then I like to do lead vocals next. Lead vocals are yellow. These will be mono. I'm going to create at least a slot for a main vocal and a harmony. So we got lead vox and then harmony. So we've got a good set so far. I'm going to throw in at least 4 slots for background vocals. And these will just be BG. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. That gives us a good starting point here. I don't put in slots for stuff I don't get very often because I find myself just deleting most of that all the time. So I used to have like a little section in here, excuse me, losing my voice, between guitars and keys for like orchestration tracks or effects tracks, and those would be more orange colored, but I didn't get that stuff enough that I felt I needed to keep it in my template. And sometimes I would have stuff up here as well, so like loop tracks, but I don't get that stuff as often as I thought I would in my mixing career here. So we've got enough tracks in here now, so we'll open up. I don't need to see instruments, I don't need to see that. Make these smaller for the moment. And now we can kind of come through here and create little groups for stuff. For the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple bus channels at the end. I don't like to use the main mix here as my mix bus. I like to save that as just a raw out, sending out with nothing on it. So I'm going to highlight everything here, and I'm going to create a bus here. If you don't have a shortcut, you can right click and add bus for selected channels. I do have a shortcut, so I'm going to use my shortcut here. And we're going to create a bus. We're going to call this mix A. And then I like to create a bus off of that as my mix bus. What this does is it gives me a little bit of leeway between my actual mix bus and what I do on my mix bus. So mix A is my pseudo mix bus here, and that's where I'll do like mix bus compression and any kind of EQ or tape machine or console stuff. And then my actual mix bus here is where my limiter goes at the end of the chain. And again, that keeps everything clean off of my main bus here. So if I pull in any reference tracks or anything like that from the client, any reference mixes or any demo mixes, they can send clean out to the main without touching the mix bus or getting any kind of character there. And I keep my mix A in case I want to do parallel mix bus compression, but I don't do that very often. But I still like having the separation between mix A and my mix bus here. So now we can come back and start to create little group buses. So the first thing I'm going to do is create overall group buses. So I'm going to highlight all my drums, and I like to throw my percussion in there as well. I used to have a group bus for percussion, but I didn't do anything on it often enough that I felt it was necessary to separate it from the drums. So I'm highlighting all my drums here. Create a bus for the selected channels, and we're going to name that drums, and I'll color it blue to match my drums. And you can see as I create buses for these channels, it'll reroute out to the mix A here. So that's drums. We'll do the same thing with bass, create a bus for these 2 channels here. That way I have one fader to control the overall bass sound, one fader to control the overall drum sound. Now you can do guitars a couple different ways. You could actually do all your instruments a couple different ways. I used to do it kind of more Dave Pensato style, where I would have a music bus, and that would be all my guitars and keys and strings and anything like that. Lately, I've kind of switched to a more home studio corner Joe Gilder style approach, where I do electrics. So I have a bus for my electric guitars, and then I'll do acoustics. And more often than not, where I'm mixing my acoustics is on the acoustic bus here, because I'll just get a pair of acoustic guitars and I'll just mix them together on the acoustic bus. So I'll kind of pan these as I want them, but we'll come back and do panning. Same thing for keys here. We'll do a keys bus, and you can see I'm coloring the buses to match the tracks that we have. So keys are pink there. Vocals. So sometimes if I get a lead vocal and a vocal double, I can just mix the lead vocal on the vocal bus here because they're both the same track. Or if I just end up with a lead vocal, I can nuke the harmony and just mix on the bus here. Same thing with background vocals. A lot of times with oohs and ahs, I'm not doing anything to the individual tracks. I'm just mixing them on the bus here, and you can see I shorthand that to BGV, background vocals. Now you can see we only have a few tracks now sending to our mix A, and it's all of our main buses here. I'm going to go back through, and we're going to create little sub-levels now inside of our group buses. And this is going to give us even more control at a more micro level. So we've done our macro stuff here with our mix bus and our group buses here. So that's giving us control over a wide range of tracks. Now I'm going to go back and create little sub-levels so I have control over smaller tracks here. So kick in and kick out. I'm going to create a little bus here, and it's just going to be the kick. So once I get a level balance between the kick in and kick out, I like to have one fader to control the kick volume overall. So that's our kick there. Same thing for the snare. Snare top and snare bottom are going to go to a snare level. And all this is, again, is just one fader to control my snare top and snare bottom. So I can balance these and then mix and balance them together here. All the toms, more often than not, I'm mixing the toms on the bus fader here. So I don't do individual EQ to the actual toms here, so the racks and the floors. I'll mix them all together here on the group bus, and if anything, just a little bit of level balancing between the toms. But sometimes I do that with actual input gain as well. Overheads and room are fine, just sending out to the drum bus. Same thing with the percussion here. If I get like a pair of congas or a pair of bongos, sometimes I'll create a little sub-level for those, but I don't build that into my template. Excuse me, bass is fine. What I'll do sometimes is create a little bus here for the rhythm guitar level, and that way I have one fader to control the rhythm guitar. Let's actually go back here and put our panning in as well. So the first rack, I like to pan audience perspective, so 30% to the right. The second one will be center. It's there with the snare. Third rack is 30% to the left, and then our floor tom will be 60% to the left. Our overheads are panned wide. Our room check would be panned wide if it's stereo, but otherwise I keep it mono. Same thing with shaker tambourine. Bass is up the center. These I'll pan wide here, so our rhythm guitars. If I pull in a pair of guitars, they'll automatically be panned wide. Lead guitar can be up the center. Same thing with the acoustics here. Panned wide if I pull in a pair. These guys are fine here, just in stereo. Background vocals, I like to pan these out. So if I get pairs of background vocals, I can pull those in. Now we have pretty much everything set up here track-wise. If we come back to the edit window, I'm going to make this smaller here. It's kind of big on the side. I'm going to create folders for the drums and for the bass and for our groups here. So I'm going to highlight all of the drums, right-click, and pack folder. And then what you can actually do, which is cool in Studio One, is link the folder to a bus. So our drum bus is now linked there. Same with the bass, and we'll link it to the bass bus. Electrics, I should create a shortcut for pack folder. I just haven't over the years. Sometimes when you do this pack folder thing, though, you can lose any of the sub routing, so we'll go back and check that. It'd be nice if it didn't overwrite, but I understand where that's coming from. Keys are in the keys folder. Lead vocals. And then background vocals to BGVs. And what this gives me is a greater sense of control as I'm mixing over my different groups. So say if I just want to focus in on maybe just the drums, I can close everything out. Or if the drums are taking up too much real estate, I can close that folder as well. So let's go back and make sure we didn't overwrite any of our busing. You can see we did here. Make sure that sends to the kick. That sends to the snare. These guys send to the toms. Bass is okay. We'll make sure these are sending back into our little rhythm guitar level here. Now we've got all of our routing set up here, all of our channels. So as we import tracks, we can kind of just assign them down as we move through, and everything will be routed out to where it should be. We don't have to create this stuff as we import tracks and spend all that time being non-creative and being technical. The next step I like to take once I get kind of all my tracks in is I like to load up my mix bus here. So that's in from the get-go, right from the start. So first thing is the console shaper here. I like to throw that at the top of my mix bus. And if you've seen any of my videos before about this, you know I kind of run it zeroed out. So everything's zeroed out. The only thing that's turned on is the drive, and it gives me a little bit of depth to my track that you kind of get from hitting a console as you mix. The next thing I'm going to throw in is my mix bus compressor here. I like to use the Britcomp, so an SSL style bus compressor, 30 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release, 2:1 ratio. We'll add a dB of makeup gain because I'm usually doing about maybe 2 dB of reduction here. And then I set the threshold here at negative 1.6, and I never touch that. I'm always mixing into that, and it gives me a very consistent level on my tracks here. And then I like to throw the soft tube tape machine here at the end of the chain. Sometimes it takes a second to load up here. There it is. And I kind of run it pretty close to default here. I kick the amount up to 5.1. I want to be sitting between the 7 and the 5 here on the VU. And then I run it on the B setting because it gives me some more bottom end weight. And then the highest tape speed, 30 IPS, 30 inches per second. So that's our mix A. That's my mix bus chain. And then on the actual mix bus here is where I put my limiter. And all this does is give me some level, so I'm mixing at a more mastered style level. That way there's no surprises when I send off my mixes to mastering, when we bump up the level to commercial level. No surprises, no balance changes there. That's kind of where I end with my template. I set it all the tracks up, so I'm ready to import, and I set up my mix bus and my mix A. The other thing you can do, which is very, very helpful, if it's just a template for mixing and you don't do any recording on the template, I actually do some recording on my template, so I don't load everything else up. But if you are doing just mixing, you can actually load in plugins as well. So you can load in your chains for all your drums. So we'll do that pretty quickly here as well. So I know my kick, my snare, my toms, overheads, room, and bass, rhythm guitars, acoustic guitars, lead guitar, keys, both vocals, and then background vocals. Everything's going to need an EQ here. So I'm going to drag an EQ onto every slot here, except for some of the group buses here. So some individual tracks, some group busing, I'll load my plugins into. And then I know I'm going to need a compressor on my kick and snare. So I'll throw my compressor on there. And I usually like another EQ after my compressor on kick and snare. So now I have my chain loaded up for my kick and snare, and I can kind of just set levels and start mixing through the chain. Toms, overheads, room, just EQ there. For tambourine and shaker, I do actually use the same chain every time. So it's this compressor with this EQ. So we'll throw that in there, drag it over. Now on the bass, usually EQ, the 1176, and then another EQ afterwards. And that same 1176, I can put on the acoustics, I can put on the piano, and I can put on both of the vocals there. Now on the electric guitars, I actually prefer the Everest. So we'll throw that on the electrics and on the lead guitar. Excuse me, we'll throw it on the organ, and actually on the organ I like using the Fairchild, so we'll put that on there. Getting a little carried away with the plugins here, but that's okay. On background vocals, I prefer the LA2A style compressor, the tube comp. Last but not least is we'll pull in a de-esser on both of the vocals here. So we'll load up my de-esser setting on the multiband, and we'll put that on both vocals. Now the last thing we need to do here is save this as a template so it shows up in our user template section as we're creating songs for mixes, for recording, for whatever here. So we're going to come up here to File, and there's actually an option to save as a template here in Studio One. So we'll click Save as Template. You can put it wherever you want as you save it. It's going to save into the template section to start, but if you want to place it somewhere else or replace an existing one, you can kind of go here. You can name it whatever you want, so we can call it Mix Temp. And as I create my templates, I kind of like to put a date on them, so it is March 1st of 24. That way I know the last time I worked on the template or last time I changed the template, and I kind of know what my current template is. So we've named it. We'll click OK. It's going to save that, and now we can close out of here. I'm going to keep it open for just a moment. We can go back to start here, and if we create a new song, we can see our user template. Here's our new mix template that we created. We can kind of open up from there, and it'll take us right back into a fresh new song with all of our plugins loaded in and everything set up for us to get working. So now what we have here is we have a fully built out template for mixing tracks. We have every track we could need. As we import tracks, we can just assign them to the preset tracks we have here. We have busing set up, we have group buses, we have our mix bus set up, we have foldering, so we're organized, we're all color coded, and we've loaded in our preset plugin chains for each of these tracks. So when it comes time to mix, it'll be about pulling these tracks in and then getting going with the mixing. No technical stuff, all creative. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.